Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Living Judaism series. Our topic for this month of May is Torah for Today. Torah for Today. So recently, somebody was asking, actually during a Shabbat Oneg, what's the Jewish position today on Torah and who gave the Torah? And, what does it mean that the Torah was revealed? And I thought, well, that's a great question that maybe we've all thought of from time to time. And since we're just a couple of weeks away from the holy day of Shavuot, which in addition to being a harvest festival, is also traditionally the day that is the anniversary. When I say today, I mean that for thousands of years, the rabbis added a layer of meaning onto Shavuot, calculating that Shavuot must be the day when the revelation at Sinai took place. And so therefore, Shavuot also, in addition to being an agricultural holiday, is the anniversary of giving Torah, receiving Torah, entering into covenant with God. And Torah is that sort of document, that constitution of our covenant. So I thought it might be interesting for us today to talk to discuss what Torah means to you, what Torah has meant to our tradition, how does Reform Judaism understand the meaning and significance of Torah. And so as you can see, the handout sort of discusses that. Once we get to the handout, we're actually going to start at the end. So we're going to do sort of like a Hebrew opening. We're going to begin with the end and work our way backwards. But before we even get there, I'm just curious to know, when you think of the word Torah, just the word itself, what comes to mind? Because we use that word a lot in Judaism. It's one of our primary words. What do you think of when we talk about Torah? Anybody want to jump right in, Maggie?
Well, I always think that Torah is what has held the Jews together for, thousands of years.
Okay,
And
yeah.
we talk about it every week at Minyan. So we talk about what it means, what it might have meant then, and what it means to us today, and how what Torah says is always changing. Not that it's changing, but that we're changing. And every time we look at it again, it can mean different things.
Nice. So yeah, Torah is this sort of jumping off point for Jewish discussion. Recently, a professor at the Rabbinical school that I was ordained from was talking about how, he sort of thinks, they always like to think big picture stuff. It's like, well, how do we understand Judaism today? Sort of this idea that's this conversation. It's this conversation that we have, currently with the current community, with the past community, looking at what they said about Judaism and the traditions. And obviously Torah is the jumping off point of that conversation. So yeah, these ongoing conversations that we have today about Judaism. Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, Philip?
Maybe it's my background in Boy Scouts, but I think of it as like a handbook or a guidebook, sort of a framework of how we're expected to do things and conduct ourselves.
Okay, nice. So sort of the metaphor of Torah is like a guidebook, a handbook for how to live Jewishly. Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely our user's manual, and we'll talk too about the meaning of the word itself, Torah. What are we referring to? What's in that manual? What are the chapters in that manual? Yeah, Tina. Thank you, Philip.
Well, he took the words right out of my mouth, believe it or not. I was going to say it was I view Torah as a handbook of how to live a Jewish life.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, definitely. It definitely is the handbook. It is hard to be Jewish and live a Jewish life without that handbook. It really teaches us how to celebrate holidays, what are Jewish views on ethics, and what are things that are important to value, and how do we relate to other people and animals and the whole world. So it really even, ongoing conversations today that we've talked to in Lunch and Learn about, what's going on right now in our country about abortion, and what's coming out of the Supreme Court. Judaism has a lot to say about when life begins and when abortion is acceptable. So it really is meant to speak to not only all aspects of Jewish life, but I would suggest Torah and Talmud and all the commentaries through the centuries really have pretty much everything to say about everything that we might experience in life. I mean, maybe it doesn't talk about social media because it didn't exist then, but we could look into the Torah and the Talmud and the commentary and sort of come up with and derive some values and teachings that might relate to how to use new technology. And that's how Torah is being applied, by the way, in hospitals. In Jewish hospitals, and new medical ethics and new breakthroughs. And they said, well, what would Judaism say about this? How can we look at the texts of the past to determine, what about cloning? What about stem cell research? What about organ donation? It's all there. It's all being talked about based on Jewish texts, based on Torah, based on Talmud, and applying it to today's world. So it really is, it can be a handbook for everything. Yeah, other thoughts. Randy, did you have your hand up? No, yeah, yes, yeah, Pilar.
Just in addition to the comments that were already said, it's also a very emotional, it just represents so much emotion for the Jewish people, and really for, like you said, Rabbi, so many other religions understand the meaning for us. And on Simchat Torah, being able to hold it, when you install the board and each board member being able to hold it, and of course at the B'nai mitzvahs. So I just want to say that for me, just holding it is so emotional.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Pilar. Yeah, it definitely, very emotional, and it is, and Pilar, as you're bringing out, in many ways, it is the central symbol of Judaism. I mean, we often think of a Jewish star, or we think of a chai, but I think the way, as you're describing it, Pilar, at these important moments and these important holidays, we're not passing a big star. We're not passing a big chai. We are passing the Torah scroll, because it really is the symbol and the embodiment of Jewish life and Jewish teaching and Jewish history and community and family. It's all there. And that's why in the Mishnah, the first layer of the Talmud in Pirkei Avot, which is often read between Passover and Shavuot, it says, turn it over and turn it over again, because everything is in there. There's this idea that really everything's in Torah. If we just continue, as Maggie was saying, continuing to return to it and discuss it, we'll find that pretty much all of life is in there. And I don't want to, say, maybe that's too broad of a statement, maybe that's too exaggerated of a statement, but most of life is in there. Most of life is in the Torah, it's in the commentary and the Talmud. And turn it over again, for everything's inside of it. And as you're saying, Pilar, and that emotional connection then that we have with all of these Jewish values and Jewish life that's so meaningful to us. Yeah. Well, and welcome folks who just joined us. Let me put in the chat box for those of you who didn't see it. We haven't gotten to it yet, but we will be looking at this document very soon, this PDF file. So please just let me know if you have a hard time opening it up. So I think it's helpful just to, to me, I think it's always helpful to define our terms and to understand, what we mean, because Torah has, it's multivalent. The term is multivalent. It has many meanings, many interpretations. So I want to talk about all the different meanings of Torah. So Torah at heart means teaching. Today it's the last day of religious school, and we're going to be celebrating our students and our teen assistants and our teachers. And the word for teacher in Hebrew is moreh or morah, and it's pretty much got the same root as Torah. So Torah really does mean teaching. Sometimes it's translated in English into law, and even I may even have a Holy Scriptures from Jewish Publication Society where it may mention the 5 books of Moses, law, but it's really not what it means. I mean, the real translation of it is Torah. There is law in Torah, but as we know, there's also story. There's also a lot of heart and emotion and conversation and dialogue. So it's so anytime that people translate Torah's law, it's really, it's not the full picture. So, but I think if we had one word to translate Torah, I would go with the word teaching. That is really the root of the word, is teaching. So sometimes when we talk about Torah, on one level, on one layer of meaning is the 5 books of Moses, right? So if we were to take out the Torah scroll in our Ark or any Torah scroll in the world, it's going to have the same 5 books, the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible, the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those are the first 5 books that are in the Torah scroll, the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible. But the Jewish Bible has another 34 books to it, or depending on how you count. Some people count the books differently. They'll count 1st and 2nd Samuel or 1st and 2nd Kings as one book. So the number's a little bit different, or they'll count all of the minor prophets as just one book of prophets. So you can, I think it's either 30, I mean, I go by 39. Some people I think might go by 24, 25 books. I forget if you reduce it all down, what you get to it. I think it's 24. But I go by 39 because that's the Tanakh that we use. There are 39 different books. So Torah on one level means those first 5 books, but Torah as Jewish teaching on the broader level means all the other 34 books. Torah, even broader than that, means the Talmud, because the Talmud is really a commentary on the Torah and the Bible. So Talmud is considered Torah. As a matter of fact, Talmud is sometimes called the oral law. And again, law is not the right word, but it's sometimes used. But the oral tradition or the oral teachings that the rabbis, their interpretations that they said, the rabbis had the audacity and the wisdom to say that, at that moment at Sinai, the Jewish tradition, the belief now is that those 5 books were presented to Moses during his lifetime. That's the traditional view. But that's questionable because even the Torah itself seems to imply that only certain sections God gave to Moses, during, at Sinai, or even during the 40 years. But other things don't really speak that way. But our tradition has come to understand that in the traditional view is that those 5 books, and that's why they're called the 5 books of Moses, those first 5 books of the Jewish Bible were communicated by God to Moses during 40 days on Mount Sinai, or during 40 years. And that's the traditional view. But as we're going to talk about, there are other views about what was given to Moses and when things were given to the Jewish people. So Torah in its broadest sense, so now if we talk about the first 5 books as Torah, the other books of the Bible as Torah, the Talmud as the oral tradition, the oral Torah, then we can talk about even commentary discussions that we're having today. And I'll go so far as to say is that when we're having a discussion, or Maggie, when you're having a discussion in Torah study and somebody comes up with a great insight, that is Torah too, that it's all Torah. Any Jewish teaching, any Jewish interpretation to this very day is in a sense Torah, because it's teaching, it's Jewish teaching. So any thoughts about that, or discussion or questions about that? Okay, so now that we sort of know what we mean by Torah, and this is, and by the way, that broader sense of the way I just described Torah, even to this day, we're going to see that's very much the Reform Jewish approach. And so I in the chat box. So now why don't I will pull up. Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Jill's referencing I received an honorary doctorate this past Monday for 25 years of serving the Jewish community. That my seminary awards a 25-year honorary doctorate for those people who serve for that length of time. So thank you. Oh, thanks, Pilar. Yeah, it's exciting. Still waiting on the diploma. They're going to mail it here to the temple. But it is nice to celebrate, and thank you all. It's great. So many people were so thoughtful on Facebook, and April took some great pics and set that up for me. So thank you all for celebrating. It really felt really special, not just to be there amongst some of my colleagues and at my rabbinical school on the LA campus, but for all the folks who responded on Facebook. It made it, that to me too was the celebration as well. So thank you for celebrating with me. So if we go now to the document, I want to go all the way to the back. I realized after I'd put it together and was spending time with it, once I put it together, it was like, oh, I really should start with the back page. So, and I will share it with you, and hopefully everybody has it. Just put in the chat if you don't, but I'm going to share my screen for those of you who may have a hard time seeing it or bringing it up on your own computer. But what you're seeing now is, I'll make it a little bit bigger. So the Reform Rabbinical Union that I belong to, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which has existed, I think, since 1873 or 1875, or maybe a little bit later. I sometimes get confused by all the late 1870s. There were so many Jewish institutions, Reform institutions being created. But certainly around 1873, 1875, the Rabbinical School was created, the Union for Reform Judaism was created, and then later the CCAR. The CCAR, over the past, 100, almost 150 years, maybe 140 years, every so often they would come out with these, call them platforms, these reform platforms, or the reform statement of principles. The first one was, I think, in 1885. And then there was one in 1937, things had changed. And then there was 1976, which was the centennial, the 100-year anniversary of some of these reform institutions. And then right around 1999, right around the turn of the millennium, there was a new statement to sort of enter the year 2000. And, in some ways, 22 years is a long time, but in some ways, in the scheme of Jewish life of 3,000 plus years, 22 years isn't that long. So they really came out with a beautiful statement of principles that you can Google. You can Google CCAR, 1999 Statement of Principles for Reform Judaism, and you'll find exactly what I can find. But what I wanted to show you is they broke it down into 3 sections: God, Torah, and Israel. And that sort of categorization of Judaism comes from the Zohar, the Jewish Kabbalistic tradition, which again is also considered Torah. The Zohar, sort of the Bible of Jewish Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. In the Zohar, it says that God, Torah, and Israel are one. And so sometimes you find Judaism described that way. How do you describe Judaism on one foot? Well, we know the famous line, "What's hateful to you, don't to another person," by Hillel. Other people might say, well, Judaism is God, Torah, and Israel. And that's how, and again, it's more than that, but just a simplified way of talking about it. That's how this document for 1999 is set up: God, Torah, and Israel. And then a lot you'll see under Torah, a lot comes under that. So I thought, why don't we just step through this and then have a discussion about this, because it's a beautiful document. It was written by a number of people. It had the voices, it had female rabbis involved, male rabbis, maybe non-binary rabbis, I'm not sure at the time. But a number of people had a hand in this document. And I think currently there are about 1,000 Reform rabbis. So, and that was the case 20 plus years ago. So would somebody like to read this statement of principles? Maggie, thank you.
Sure. We affirm that Torah is the foundation of Jewish life. We cherish the truths revealed in Torah, God's ongoing revelation to our people, and the record of our people's ongoing relationship with God.
Okay, Maggie, I'm sorry, forgive me. Let's just stop there because there's so much being said in those first two paragraphs or two sentences. Each one, as you can see, really stands as a paragraph. The first thing I think a number of people have been saying today, we affirm that Torah is the foundation of Jewish life, right? Another way of saying it's the user's manual. It's another way of saying is you know, as Pilar was saying, when you embrace Torah, that's the foundation. You are embracing the foundation of Jewish life. So I think it's beautifully stated. And if you're looking for a way to describe Torah to somebody else, if you're looking for some other words in addition to what we've talked about, that's a nice way to say it. It's the foundation of Jewish life. And then we cherish the truths revealed in Torah. Now, see there, what I love about this document, it went through many iterations and edits, and it's vague enough, it's ambiguous enough that you can interpret that first phrase many different ways. We cherish the truths revealed in Torah. Truths revealed in Torah. Not truths that God revealed to Moses. Now, you could interpret it that way, but you can interpret it another way. So it could be the truths that God revealed to Moses, or what's another way to interpret truths revealed in Torah? How else might you understand that? If it's not God revealing it to Moses at Mount Sinai or in the 40 years, how were the truths revealed?
I was sorry.
Yes, Sally.
But when I read it the first time, to me, it resonated with the revealed is how we interpret, and how we interpret changes through time. And that's why we've got the Talmud and Rabbi's commentaries and all of these other things, so that we can reveal the various levels and different applications that could be applied.
Nice, Sally. Yeah, nice. So the truths being revealed is sort of an ongoing revelation of truth. And that's actually the line, that second phrase there. God's ongoing revelation to our people and the record of our people's ongoing relationship with God. So this is very much a reform concept, but I think it's also in conservative and reconstructionist that the revelation is ongoing. The truths are continuing to be revealed. Now, in the Orthodox world, they might say God explained everything to Moses. Every conversation that we have about Torah today, any insight or interpretation that we might discover right now, that God told all that to Moses. Moses was on such a high spiritual plane, was in such close contact with God. They were that Moses's prophecy was so pure and pristine and clear that any conversation that we have today, Moses knew about it, and it already was revealed to Moses. Now that's how the Orthodox understand it, meaning, and there are reasons that they might say it that way. But a non-Orthodox Jew would say, sure, human beings, it's an ongoing revelation. We're continuing to evolve. Sometimes it's called progressive revelation. As humanity and civilization progresses in our understanding of the world, and that as we progress, and sometimes we go backward too, but as human beings progress, therefore truths and insights progress as well. And as Sally was saying, this sort of continuing revelation of truth. So sometimes you'll hear in ongoing revelation, that's sort of a term, ongoing revelation, progressive revelation. those are letting us know that it was not a one-time event, that we don't see God revealing truths to human beings as a one-time event. It's an ongoing event. Yeah, Randy.
I think also it doesn't say the truth.
Ah, yes, the truth. Nice. Right, the truth. There can be multiple truths. There can be different interpretations of what is true, different perspectives. Yes, it does allow for a variety of perspectives on this, which is one of the things I really love about Judaism, particularly the type of Judaism that we practice. You know, we don't say we hold the truth, and if you don't accept the truth that we subscribe to, you're wrong, you're less than, you're unenlightened. That's not the approach. There's a humility involved with these concepts, and in the way, as Randy, the way you're saying this is phrased, there's a humility here. And so I hope it resonates with you. It really resonates with me. Randy, are you thinking of something?
Actually, I wasn't thinking of it in terms of humility.
Yeah.
I generally read the weekly Torah portion that comes out on Mondays.
Yeah.
And it's in the middle of Leviticus. And, you know, there are a lot of things that this is how we do things that we don't agree with anymore.
Right.
Or at least Reform and conservative Jews don't believe in anymore.
Well, and I want to say Orthodox too. You know, when it says in the Torah that if you have a rebellious child, take them out and stone them to death, nobody in the Orthodox world's going to do that. You know, so and the rabbi, and I love to say it's one of my favorite sort of quotes from the Talmud. When the rabbis came to these troubling passages in the 5 books of Moses, in that level of Torah, and it would say, you know, if you have a rebellious child, or if your child insults a parent, take him out and kill him, stone him to death. The rabbis say in the Talmud, this never happened. They literally express it like that. I'm really not paraphrasing. They're saying, they said in the Talmud, this never happened. It is here for us to study, and by our study of it, we gain merit. That's how they interpreted these troubling passages. And so we have been interpreting, and we have been, the Jewish people have been disturbed by passages in the 5 books of Moses for quite some time. And the question is, well, what do we do with it? And, you know, and the rabbis had a lot to say about what to do with it. And they really did rewrite a lot of it. They really did write stuff out of doing it. I'll give you another example, capital punishment. It says in the Torah, capital punishment is allowed, but there must be 2 witnesses who can attest to the fact that somebody murdered somebody else. You need 2 witnesses. The rabbis go even further. They say, not only do you need 2 witnesses, but those 2 witnesses must have gone to the person prior to them committing the murder and warning them, we know what you want to do. If you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. And 2 people need to do that, warn the person. So let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say somebody murders somebody and they didn't get the double warning. The rabbi would say, you cannot do capital punishment then. So what did they do? In a sense, how realistic is that to say 2 people are going to say, don't do it? It's completely unrealistic. So in a sense, they got rid of capital punishment. They got rid of it. That was their doing. It was radical what they did. But it was abhorrent to them. In the same way, it may be abhorrent to us to murder somebody, and you may murder the wrong person, or kill somebody, not murder. You may kill somebody who did not commit the crime. And that is worse. And so they found a way to get rid of capital punishment. The only capital punishment that has been taking place in Israel, do you know the only time Israel has done that? Randy, when's the only time Israel allowed for capital punishment? Eichmann, because his crime was so extreme And there were so many witnesses, although it wasn't the rabbinical thing. Hey, Eichmann, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And nobody did that. But they said, okay, this is to such a degree that we've got to do it. The only time, Eichmann. Yeah. Yeah, Jan? Oh, Jan, you need to unmute there.
This is one of the most interesting questions that you're discussing, which is what do we leave behind? What do we take with us?
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's sort of a meta statement somewhere in the Torah that the Torah itself tells us that it's a living document and should be reviewed and should be considered.
Yeah.
Or does the Torah say, no, this is it, don't deviate at all?
Well, unfortunately, Jan, that is the truth. When you get to the book of Deuteronomy, and as we've been doing in Journey Through the Bible, the book of Deuteronomy is it's this way, and it's very directive. It's very prescriptive and proscriptive. It says, do not deviate to the left or to the right of this. Now, the question is, what is this? Is this a particular chapter in Deuteronomy? The tradition has come to understand it means the whole Torah. So that's why in the Orthodox world, even though the rabbis themselves did some radical interpretation, in the Orthodox world, they would say, well, but the rabbis have a right to do that because it was the oral tradition that was revealed to Moses. And so, so the question is, so I think, so Jan, I think we're not going to find it in the Torah. I think we're going to find it in Jewish history. I think we're going to find it in the way the Talmud says when they don't know how to practice a certain mitzvah that's in the Torah. It literally says in the Talmud, if it's a really difficult thing and they just don't know what to do, go out into the street and see what people are doing. Meaning, see what the community is doing. That's the closest we're going to get, one of the close expressions we're going to get, Jan, to this meta thing of, if we're trying to decide and we don't know, see what the community is doing. So therefore, then here's the meta that I wanted us to think about. When we think about who wrote the Torah, and where does the authority come from? Because I think there are two meta questions to answer. How was Torah revealed? And where does the authority come from to interpret that or to make changes? Or where does the authority come from for the Jewish teaching to be binding on us? To me, those are the two big questions for any Jewish person to answer or for any denomination to answer. How was Torah revealed? Let's start with that one. How was Torah revealed? Now, I want to, again, allow for different interpretations and different perspectives. So for those people, who think, who believe or think that God did reveal all of this to Moses at Mount Sinai, that's a legitimate perspective. That's a legitimate perspective to hold in a Reform congregation or a conservative, Reconstruction, Orthodox. If one believes that the Torah comes directly from God, as Maimonides said in the 13th century, the way that it was revealed, that literally, and this is in Maimonides' Principles of Faith in the 13th century, that literally God dictated the truths of Torah to Moses, and Moses was like a recording secretary. Maimonides articulated it in that exact way. And that is a way to understand it, that Moses was merely, okay, God, wait, did I get this right? Don't do this or do this. Are my words right? God, here's my transcript. Is this right? God says, yes, Moses, that's what I said. That's what I meant. That's what my will is. That is an idea of how Torah is revealed. Now, I don't believe that, but that's my perspective and that's my choice to what I believe. But if somebody does hold that position, you got a strong basis for it. The great Maimonides, that's what he said. He said, this is what you should believe. God dictated all this to Moses, and Moses, it was an accurate, no mistakes, no typos, no misunderstandings, no mistakes. It is the perfect will of God, the perfect teaching of God. There are no mistakes. That is the Orthodox position, and that is the Maimonidean position. And it has value. I just don't believe it. So what are some other ways to believe it, to believe that the statement of these reform principles, we cherish the truths revealed in Torah? How then are truths revealed? I mean, Sally, you mentioned it. One approach is that truths are revealed through interpretation, through debate, through conversation. If I'm understanding you, Sally, that is a way that truths are revealed. So human reason, human debate, argument, logic is a part of the revelation of truth. What do y'all think of that approach? I hope I articulated okay, but what would you say in your mind? Well, I'll ask it this way. How do you think truths are revealed? Even religious truths, even Jewish truths that have God as somehow involved in the relationship. How are truths revealed? Philip, are you unmuting there?
Yeah, is it by our actions, I suppose? You know, doing the right thing, maybe.
Right.
Although that leaves room for interpretation also.
Right. And I'm wondering too, if you're saying we come to truth through experience, that we figure out through our actions, oh, that worked. That didn't work. This seems true of life based on our experience. This seems true of life based on our experience. This may not be a proper approach to take. So yeah, I think there's an element of we make decisions based upon experience. I'll give you one that I love, and we're going to be doing that peace walk. And the Methodists, I keep talking about. I've talked before about the Methodist quadrilateral of how do you interpret sacred scripture, and the Methodist quadrilateral is or how do you know what's true, or how to live your life? The Methodist quadrilateral is there is scripture, there is tradition, there is reason, and there is experience. So scripture, in a sense, would be, in Jewish terms, Bible, Torah. Tradition would be Talmud, oral tradition. And then today, it's our own reason, our own human mind, and our own human experience. So again, the Wesleyan, the Methodist quadrilateral is scripture, tradition, reason, experience. And when I heard that, I said, that's beautiful. That's Reform Judaism. You've just described Reform Judaism. In the early days of Reform, in the first platform, they talked all about reason. It was all about human reason. The Enlightenment, the age of the Enlightenment, reason. Well, reason gets us a lot of progress, but reason doesn't account for everything. As Pilar was mentioning, there's an aspect of heart. There's an aspect of heart that sometimes maybe, and I'm not, Pilar, I'm not suggesting you were saying that it's illogical. I'm saying, but things of the heart, things of the emotion are not always reason. There's not always logic based, but it is experience based. It's the experience of emotion. It's the experience of relationship. It's the experience of how does this action or this tore in my arms, how does it make me feel? How do I respond to it? That is truth too. So Joan Didion, the great writer here in Los Angeles, talked about the emotional truth. Yeah, there's the literal truth, but there's the emotional truth. There is you're going to see Rabbi Richard Rubinstein talked about the psychological truth, which is another way of saying the emotional truth, but it's also allowing for other aspects to our psyche, our soul, our mind. So the truths revealed in Torah, that involves the words on the page, that involves how our tradition understands it, that involves the discussions that we have about it. It also involves what's in your very own heart and mind. That when you come across a Jewish teaching or a Jewish tradition and you say, yes, I can affirm this as true for me, that's a revelation of truth. There was a instructor, Eugene Mahali, of blessed memory at my rabbinical school. He said, where does the authority come from for the mitzvot? Now, in an Orthodox world, that's a very easy, the answer is, what do you mean? It comes from Torah, it comes from Talmud. That's where authority comes from about whether or not to do a mitzvah. It's what the Torah and the Talmud say. Eugene Mahali's answer from a Reform perspective, it comes from within. When you say, this is the right action to take, and I can do no other, that is the mitzvah. The authority comes from you. It comes from within. Now, that's a very humanistic approach. That's a very individualistic approach. That's a very Reform Jewish approach. But that's part of our Reform tradition. Individual autonomy. The individual decides how they're going to live their Jewish life. The individual is going to pick up that user manual. They're going to read through it, and they are going to decide for themselves what they are going to do or what they're not going to do. The autonomy of the individual. It's a very Reform philosophical approach to Torah and Mitzvot. It's not necessarily shared in the Orthodox world. It's shared a little bit more in conservative and Reconstructionist, but not to that strong of a statement that you decide. But back to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So if you've got the power to decide for yourself how to interpret Torah, what mitzvot to do or what not to do, then the responsibility is to be learned. The responsibility is to be knowledgeable and know what the tradition says, know what the Torah says, know what the Talmud says, what the commentaries say. And based on that knowledge, then searching within your own heart and your own mind. So back to the Wesleyan quadrilateral. Scripture, tradition. Have to know scripture and tradition. Then are you able to apply your reason and your experience and your heart to make the decision. I do think Reform Judaism would say, well, I'm just going to do whatever I'm going to do, and I'm not going to consult the texts. That's not really Reform either. You've got to know what the tradition says. I'm sorry, I feel like I've been talking for a long time. I'm very passionate about it. And I think these are sort of the aspects to it. But any thoughts or any other comments or questions? Yeah, Maggie.
That just seems, it seems kind of dangerous to me.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, it's kind of like, I see that people that I disagree since extremely with feel like they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of issue I think it brings up to me.
Well,
like,
thank you, Maggie.
God is on our side. Oh yeah, God is on our side too. And
well,
people can be very sincere in their belief. That's horrible.
Well,
anyway.
so let's take that scenario, because you're right, Maggie, there is a slippery slope. And by the way, that's why the Orthodox say, once you start picking and choosing, you've already gone down that road. And that's the Orthodox approach. Once you start having that level of authority yourself, you're far away. from where the text is at, right, at that point. So let's talk about somebody who interprets their religion and their faith to be God is on my side and everybody else is wrong. What is the antidote to that type of perspective? And by the way, I think the fundamentalists are the biggest ones who take that approach, Maggie. I think it's fundamentalist Jews and fundamentalist Christians and fundamentalist Muslims and fundamentalists and Buddhists, Hindus, anybody who's a fundamentalist, they're going to believe exactly what you said. Because I'm following the truth, capital T, the truth. Because I'm following the truth and you are not. Therefore, you are wrong and I am right. So I think we have the same problem, even if you say that these texts are 100% authoritative and correct. Because the texts contradict each other. The Jewish text is going to contradict the Islamic text, is going to contradict the Christian text. They're going to contradict each other. So you've already got it built in.
It contradicts itself.
Right, sure. But to me, the antidote to that type of thinking of the truth is reason, is experience, is anything else in life. We're going to try to have a discussion. We're going to try to bring reasons to why we think the way that we do. And hopefully then we can reach some better understanding. But as we know in this society, even then, you cannot convince the other side. You cannot persuade them to their position, and people are going to dig in their heels and they're going to each say, I'm right, you're wrong. Yeah, Randy, and then Philip, and then Pilar. I'm sorry if I'm.
Philip, you can go first.
I experienced this on a personal level several months ago when my mother passed away, as some people know. I have a very Orthodox sister who lives in Israel, and my mother many years ago chose to be cremated. And when this came up, it was very, very, very painful for my sister. And she had her husband, her kids, her in-laws calling me and my oldest brother, begging, pleading, tearing themselves inside out. And I think in the end, the decision was, what we said is, it's not our decision. This is what mom made. This is what was her choice, whether we agree with it or not, and we need to honor it. And I think in the end, I don't think she changed her position at all. She just felt she was outnumbered and there was nothing she could do, but she adamantly believed that this was the wrong thing to do based on her belief from the Torah.
Yeah. So sometimes people, can agree to disagree, and it's painful too. It's painful when people really believe this is the right thing to do, and there's two perspectives that really are at odds with each other. That's painful. That's hard. That's difficult.
I guess you could say it was, they were following honor your mother.
Right. So different values. Right. So they were both operating from different values. And there was a chancellor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And, when I first heard it, I said, absolutely right. And it seems obvious once you hear it. But the hardest decisions in life, I forget the name of the chancellor from the Jewish Theological Seminary, the conservative seminary, said the hardest decisions in life are when you have two competing values, and you're trying to make a decision on which value is going to take precedent. Very difficult. And again, Philip, what you all did is a number of people, everybody had a say in it. And again, it was sort of a democratic approach. And that's what, too, I connect with about Reform Judaism. This is a very democratic process. Everybody's got to vote. And Maggie, I just want to say, and I know we have some other hands go up, but Maggie, I think the other fix too to this sort of rugged individualism, this, oh, the individual can do whatever they want. Yeah, it can lead to anarchy. So here's the fix to that. The
Yes.
fix is community.
That's what I was going to
That's
say.
what you're going to say, Randy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have to, there's the balance between keeping a communitarianism versus being your own individual. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry I cut you to the chase, Randy. But it was back to that Talmudic thing. Go out and see what people are doing. Go out and see what the majority are doing. And then you will have your answer. So yeah, so it's that sense of the individual and the community. But there are going to be times where the individual is at odds with the community, right? The community might think one way and the individual says, no, I disagree with the community. That's what, speaking of MLK, MLK was, went to prison over it. The community's wrong. The law is wrong. I'm willing to go to prison. Henry David Thoreau. I'm willing to go to prison over this because you all are wrong. So sometimes the individual is at odds with the community. Yeah. Yeah, Sally.
Excuse me, I think
Oh, sorry.
it was Pilar.
Oh, Pilar, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Pilar.
That's
Pilar
okay.
and Sally.
That's all right. I just want to say that there is no perfect religion, but from what I read, every religion has something good to offer. So the problem comes in when people of a certain religion believe that it is the perfect religion, and people of another religion, if they didn't exist, the world would be better off. So.
Could you repeat that last thing, Pilar? Could you say that one again?
I said the problem exists when people of a certain belief or a certain religion believe that if another religion and people of that religion didn't exist, the world would be a better place.
Mm.
So, and like you said, Rabbi, it's the fundamentalists in each religion that sometimes tend to be in that group.
Yeah, if we could only get rid of this, then
Mhm.
everything would be great. Yeah.
Would be great, yeah.
Yeah.
And I really don't know how to, other than John Lennon's song, Imagine, coming to fruition, I really don't know how we can ever get to that place. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well said, Pilar. Well said. Thank you. Yeah, Sally, and then Jan.
I had a question. Does the Torah actually forbid cremation? Because I was under the impression that the reason why Jews kind of like ceased doing cremation had to do with the Holocaust and the burning. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize it went back to the Torah.
Yeah. Well, that is part of it. It's sort of a multi-layered sort of Jewish approach to cremation. By the way, it's also evolved for those people who, originally said we shouldn't do cremation because of the Holocaust. A number of people are now saying in the Jewish world, no, cremation has a lot of value. It's good for the environment. It takes up less space. There are ways to cremate now too, including water, using water. So it's very eco-friendly. And it's taking up less earth and water to water the land and all that stuff. So I think that also is evolving. I think the Jewish approach is evolving on cremation very much. But the basis for it, there is a basis for it in the Torah where it says the body returns to the earth, and that's interpreted then to be, well, cremation is not returning the body to the earth. So there's a little bit text-based. I mean, it's text-based as well as historical-based.
I thought it was resurrection.
Well, that's part of it. That's the other layer of it too. So yeah, it's multi-layered here. The other part of it too is that, and that's why by the way, you will see, God forbid, when there is a terrorist incident and anywhere in the world involving Jewish people, there are people collecting the remains of the body. They're picking up every little piece because they're wanting to put as many of the pieces back together so that when they're, at the future world when God resurrects all the bodies, you want the body intact. Again, it's not necessarily logical, because if God has the power to resurrect a body, God certainly has the power to put the body back together the way it was, without having to collect up all the little pieces. So it's belief based, and it's textual based, and it's tradition based, but it's evolving. It's also progressive. And again, Philip and to talk, you and your other siblings were coming from a more liberal, progressive approach to interpreting Torah, whereas your sister was taking a more orthodox approach to how you interpret Torah. And two different approaches. Let's see. So Sally, that was your question. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Jan. Oh, Jan, you had your hand up. Thanks.
Going back to Pilar's statement about how some religions feel the need to exclude, to destroy other points of view, other people with that points of view, and that's the antidote is democracy, where theocracy is the poison, and we're facing that now. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that when Maggie was talking about God's on our side, it made me think of a song by Dylan called "With God's on Our Side," and all these wars, you go back in history, all the wars, the Civil War, World War I, where each side thought God was on their side. And the last verse of that song is, if God's on our side, he'd stop the next war.
Mm.
And the fact that God won't do that means it's up to us. And there's some way out of the morass of everybody's subjective interpretations, views, and certainties, which, of course, collide with each other and lead to war. And what's the path out of that, given human nature?
Yeah. That's the tough one. And I do think this is a human thing. It's not just a religious thing, it's a human thing. Because we could say if religion had nothing to do with it, it's political fights. It's just human nature to what do we do and how do we make decisions about what do we do and how do we enforce what we do and make sure it gets done. I think it's just a societal thing, and we deal with it in religion, people deal with it in politics, people deal with it in organizations, people deal with it in schools, people deal with it in families. It's just, how do you make the best decisions and figure out what is the best path forward with particular issues? But absolutely, Jan, absolutely.
I know
Maggie,
it's a terribly broad question. It almost wasn't fair. So excuse me for that.
Well, but I think, we're applying these conundrums of how do we know truth? How do we arrive at truth? And once we arrive at it, how do we enforce it? This is part and parcel to how do you live your life? How do you live your life? Yeah, Maggie.
There's an image that what Pilar said, it brought up to me. This is something that I've felt at other times. And I always feel like religion it's like everybody's at the base of this huge mountain, and each religion is somewhere around the mountain, and we're all going to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And if only we could communicate with each other and allow the other, things would be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think
there is human nature, which is.
Yeah. And by the way, I can see the people on the mountain, one group screaming to the other, hey, come over here, this is the right path, you're going the wrong way, and we're going to get there first, and you guys don't know what you're doing. I can see all that happening too. But I do like that image, Maggie, of we're all going up the same mountain and we're taking different paths, but not everybody would agree with that. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem. I keep quoting, I don't know why I keep quoting some of my teachers, but the rabbi that I worked with in Dallas, Ken Roseman, said one of the most wise and insightful, brilliant things, when we were having a conversation about something. He said, in this world, some human beings are monists and some human beings are pluralists. And by monist, what he meant was they think there is one way and it is this way. And there are other people whose perspective is more pluralistic, as you're saying, Maggie. Maggie, that's a pluralistic metaphor. But for a monist who says there's only one right way, they would say, I reject the metaphor. And I don't think there's a way to change somebody from being a monist to a pluralist. I don't think it's possible. They might change for themselves through their own experience, but you cannot convince them to be open-minded. You cannot convince somebody to be open-minded when they say, no, this is it. This is the right way. There's no other way. This is it. You can't convince them otherwise. Impossible. There are monists and there are pluralists. And I do think I'm probably, we're probably, we're a group of pluralists right here. But if there was a monist among us, we'd be having a different conversation.
I'm glad you added that through your own experience, you can actually change, because we hear stories like that a lot.
Yeah.
But it
yeah, and those
their experience, can't be.
Right. We have influence. But yeah, they're ultimately, and this is why I think it's true. This is why true. So for me, I think this is human nature. What we are describing here, this reform approach, is human nature, because ultimately the individual decides everything they do in their life. They decide what action to take. They decide, people may influence, may coerce them, may punish them. But ultimately, the individual decides every aspect of their life. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? They're going to decide whether or not they're going to drink. Can't make them. So what I find about this approach is it is very, it's how we live our lives, basically. We make decisions that we think are the best decisions. We may be punished for our decisions. There may be consequences to our decisions. People may not like our decisions, but isn't that how people operate? Yeah, Pilar.
I just think it's important to say that we're fortunate that we can make our own decisions. In many countries, people are not, and especially women of other countries. So
thank you, Pilar. Absolutely.
A little prayer of gratitude for that I live here.
Prayer of gratitude for that. And that is why Reform Judaism has flourished in America in a democracy. Reform can only flourish in a democracy because it shares the democratic values. And you're absolutely right. Yes, to be fortunate to have the freedom to make our decisions, as we're seeing some of those decisions are going to be restricted in this country. And then what do we do? And so that'll be an ongoing conversation, and other paths to freedom, other paths to choice, other paths to reproductive choice are already presenting themselves. And have presented themselves and will continue to present themselves, but we still have to ensure those rights and those freedoms without a doubt. Yeah, for people in this country and throughout the world as much as we can. Yeah, it's a very good point. All right, well, let's continue on. I know we could spend hours talking about this because it is so deep, and this is the meta stuff, Jen. As far as I'm concerned, we're in the meta right now, and let's go down a little bit. And again, I think this is a beautiful statement similar to what we've been talking about. Let's share again. And Maggie, if you would continue the next highlighted, the next highlighted section, we are committed. Again, we're in the Statement of Principles of Reform Judaism, 1999. We are committed.
We are committed to the ongoing study of the whole array of mitzvot and to the fulfillment of those that address us as individuals and as a community. Some of these mitzvot sacred obligations have long been observed by Reform Jews. Others, both ancient and modern, demand renewed attention as the result of the unique context of our own times.
Okay, and I think that's the complete thought right there.
Mhm.
So, and this was a, again, this idea. So, okay, so if we're saying Torah is open to interpretation and ongoing revelation, still we are committed, as important as Torah is, and it is the foundation, but the practice of Judaism, the actual activity of Judaism is the mitzvot. Those are the behaviors that we do in relation to what Torah is talking about and teaching us about. So then the idea that we are committed to the study of all the mitzvot and to the fulfillment of those that address us as individuals, back to that idea, the individual decides, and as a community, back to the idea that the community also decides. One may decide that they're going to eat pork and shellfish and cheeseburgers and all that, and in Reform perspective, okay, you have the freedom to do that. But it doesn't mean when you come to Temple Sinai, we're going to allow you to bring in your pepperoni pizza with shrimp on top. The community says no to that. So we are making behavioral decisions as individuals and as a community. But the idea is we're going to fulfill those that address us as individual community. We're going to study all the mitzvot, and there may be some that we say, no, not for me. This one is for me, this one's not for me. This one's for me, but I'm not going to do it in the community because the community has a different approach to it, such as bringing in a pepperoni pizza at the Temple Sinai. Some of these mitzvot, sacred obligations, have long been observed by Reform Jews. Others, both ancient and modern, demand renewed attention as a result of the context in which we live. At the first ordination ceremony of the Reform rabbis in Cincinnati, I think it was in 1889, because if it was founded in 1885, the first ordinate class was 4 years later. Or 5 years later, it was called the Treifa banquet because they brought in shrimp. At the ordination ceremony reception, they brought in shrimp. And I mean, it was a scandal to some. To others, it was like, but that's reform. Why not? Make your statement, plant your flag. But the recognition is that the early reformers, so-called classical reform, the synagogue that I went to in St. Louis, if you were wearing a kippah, a brotherhood usher would come over and say, you need to please remove that. We don't do that here. That's called classical reform. We're going to assimilate into America. We're going to look like our Protestant, neighbors, and let's not do anything that looks too overtly Jewish. We're going to assimilate into American society. Obviously, we made it. We've been bringing back traditions that Reform didn't do in the early days. We don't do the organ anymore. We wear kippot. We wear talit. And so this is reflective of that. We may have done things, got rid of a lot of stuff in the past, ritual stuff, but we're bringing it back because it has value to us. It has meaning to us. It touches us. It moves us. So this is a statement saying, don't go too radical on us. Be open to all the possibilities, and then you choose which ones are meaningful, but you got to be open to all the possibilities. What do y'all, any thoughts about that one? Yeah, Philip.
I was also raised in a Reform synagogue here in Los Angeles, and Rabbi did not wear a kippah. It was not something that we did, and for many years coming to Temple Sinai, whenever my mother-in-law was with us, she would hand me a kippah almost like as a commandment, like, you need to do this. And I thought, it's not how I was raised. And it took many years for me to do it on my own. And now I wouldn't, as long as I remember, it's something that I do habitually at Temple Sinai, but it took a while to come around to realize and be at a comfort level that it's not how I was raised.
Yeah, experience, and again, the emotional aspects to it, those are powerful. The memories, the experiences that we have, the emotions we have surrounding it do impact change and different ways of doing things. Yeah. So we've come a long way, right? There was a time my dad said, growing up so he didn't grow up that way. I mean, he grew up a little bit Orthodox and conservative and Reform and a little bit of all three. He had all three in his family. And I remember he said to me when I visited my temple in St. Louis, the place where he said, you got to take your kippah off. He said, when I come to services now, Rick, I don't even recognize it. I don't even recognize what we're doing anymore. They're really more Hebrew, more ritual, more changes, different tunes. And I really felt for him. I felt for him. I wasn't where he was at. I made the changes, but it was harder for him. And yeah, that type of change is difficult. Yeah. Jan, was your hand up?
Yes. I have a personal curiosity. I mean, a curiosity about my own behavior. I was raised in a conservative temple, Beth Shalom, in San Francisco, and Rabbi White was the rabbi. And my dad ate bacon, but it didn't. He was a good man, so there's not a one-to-one correlation there. And then when I grew up, for some reason, for most of the time, I'm a kosher light. I'm kosher light, and I don't know why. I know Reform doesn't demand it. I know it's not in my personal tradition, and it's a kind of a strange thing the way salmon return to, their spawning grounds. That feels like that, and yet I would love a cheeseburger. So
That's funny. Yeah.
Wear the circle for me or something.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, why do we do what we do? What's meaningful to us? What resonates with us? And times when are we ambivalent about it? Sure. Yeah, that's all a part of this. Yeah, Maggie.
I think one of the nice things about Temple Sinai and maybe the Reform movement everywhere, I don't know, but is that it's still a choice. Not everybody wears a kippah, not everybody wears a talit. You still do what feels right to you, and I think I really appreciate that.
Yeah, choice. Yeah, choice is yeah, definitely a value. Yeah. All right. Well, very nice. Any other thoughts? Any other? Yeah, Sally.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there rules about who can wear a talit? Like, you have to have a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, or are there rules, or anybody can wear them that wants one?
As far as what gender you are?
Gender and status, education. I mean, I don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, so I mean, so the tradition is, well, a kippah can happen at any time. I mean, you could be, you could be 8 days old and it's your bris, be wearing a kippah, and girls too, if they, can wear a kippah, not at a bris, but at a baby naming ceremony. So the kippot come right at birth. The talit traditionally comes at the time of bar bat mitzvah age, 12 years old for a girl, 12 years old in a day in conservative and Orthodox Reconstructionist world. In the Reform world, 13 years old in a day, that's when talit tot can start being worn. So the tradition really is, and I think Reform follows this too, is you start wearing a kippah at your bar bat mitzvah ceremony. That's the first time, or your b'nai mitzvah ceremony. That's the first time, your talit, that's the first time you begin wearing your talit. And girls can, wear a kippah and a talit, as can boys, or they can decide to wear one or neither. So as Maggie was saying, there is that choice, but the tradition is kippah right when you're born if you want, and talit more around the age of bar bat mitzvah.
I think the question is, if you haven't had a bar bat mitzvah, can you wear a talit?
Oh, thank you, Randy. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're, and again, I'd say the tradition, if you're over 12 years of age, yes. So, yes. So adult. And by the way, the approach, Sally, to what bar and bat mitzvah means, it's not a ceremony. We do a ceremony. It is a status of age. So once a Jewish child turns 12 years in a day for a girl, or 13 years is the Reform approach, you're automatically bar or bat mitzvah. You don't have to have a ceremony. It's like being 16 years old and being able to drive, and it's like 18 years old and being able to vote. It is a status of age. So yeah, so the answer is one does not have to have had a bar bat mitzvah ceremony to wear a talit, to read from the Torah, but once you're of age. Yeah. Okay, Kathy, yeah.
So I noticed that people who walk into the sanctuary on Friday night who are not Jewish will go ahead and put on a kippot. Do they also put on a talit if they're not Jewish?
They could if they want to. I mean, it's their choice. If it was a conservative synagogue, they would say, wear this talit. They wouldn't let you in the sanctuary unless you were wearing a talit if you were a man. Okay. I mean, it used to be that way. It used to be that way. It may have changed. It's been a while since I've walked in a conservative synagogue. But when I was growing up, they'd hand you it and expect you to put it on if you were of age and you were a man. And similarly, if you were not Jewish and you walked in that conservative congregation, they'd make you put that talit on.
And one more question, is the material of significance? Because I noticed that sometimes they are warm looking wraps that are quite 45-inch wide, and other times, like yours, has a smaller collar area.
Yes.
So it's not so burdensome. Is there any discussion on our different? I mean, in Reform, I'm going to guess that we can do whatever we want as long as it has the seat.
Well, you're right. The seat is the major thing. And I think even in a non-Reform world, as long as you're wearing a thing that's got four corners, a garment that has four corners, that has the seat tied properly according to tradition, that's what makes the talit kosher, not necessarily the material or the length or the width of it. Yeah. All right. Well, great question. So like I said, guys, this could really be a series because it's so rich and it's so deep. And I want to encourage you to, read over what we didn't read over today in the Statement of Principles, and also read over those three rabbis who give their take on what is Torah and what is Revelation. Very enlightening and just different perspectives on it, more liberal perspectives, obviously. We talked about the more traditional perspective of what Torah is and Revelation. So I want to recommend that to all of you. I just also want to mention that this is our last Living Judaism class until we reconvene for the fall. So our adult ed programs, apart from Lunch and Learn, will continue during the summer, but not in July. So the adult eds that I lead, Lunch and Learn will continue in June, the second Thursday in June at 12 o'clock. Journey Through the Bible and the Living Judaism series will be on hiatus until after the holidays. So want to thank you all for participating. Want to thank Jill Nemiro, who's on with us today, our adult education chair, and I know a number of folks here are on the adult education committee. Thank you all. There are more wonderful adult ed programs going on that Jill and the committee have planned. So please check your email about the upcoming adult ed programs. And we'll continue to learn together and to study together. And I need to get running because we've got the closing day assembly with our religious school, and it starts in 5. So I'm going to transition into that.
Thank you very much for the discussion, Rabbi.
You are most welcome.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Maggie.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
see everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You are welcome. Thank you. I guess I will stop the recording.
Bye all.